comes to the film Dumb Money, I'm going to be completely honest, I found it to be quite enjoyable. Firstly, I just really enjoyed the plot, as when this was actually happening, I knew nothing of the situation, and so when going into this film, it really hooked me and it caught my undivided attention all the way through. When it comes to characters, I really enjoyed them all, but especially the Wall Street Bet supporters, as we see that they don't really do this to gain financially. They just do it to support Keith Gill as they're a fan of his YouTube channel, and they really enjoy what he's talking about, and it's in a way a big fuck you to the Wall Street guys, which is always interesting. And we somewhat see their arc as well, as they go from doing this for a little bit of fun to see their money going up, and then they really get invested with the whole culture of Wall Street Bets, being on the Reddit situation, all the memes, and then when it really blows up, they invest more into the stock, hoping it gets big, bankrupting all the Wall Street guys. And then we see in their community, some are just so invested that they're making friendships with other people, getting into relationships with other people, and some even grow in confidence after this whole situation. It's really nice to watch as an arc, seeing these characters blow up from the very beginning to the very end. When it comes to the protagonist, Keith Gill, he was very enjoyable to watch, and again, like those people, he wasn't doing it for a financial situation. He invested all his money into this stock because he really believed in it, and he just wanted to prove that Wall Street, they aren't always right, they're not the smartest people on the planet when it comes to this stuff, and he actually believes he knows better. He betted on himself because he was that confident. It was really interesting to see. That's the whole seed that started this whole idea. I really enjoyed how they created the setting of 2020 throughout this film, seeing it very desolate to an extent, even isolated. Somewhat in a sense can be seen as a metaphor for how Keith felt in the very beginning when starting this whole GameStop idea, as he was the only one investing, putting a huge amount of money into this, and then as the film moves along, we see that isolation and desolence fade away, as it could be seen as a metaphor for people joining Keith on his journey on the Wall Street bets and all of that. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I was a bit surprised by Pete Davidson's portrayal of Keith's brother, as he was quite an unlikable character, which is very odd to see from the actor, as he usually plays the comic relief in most films, and even looks like that in the trailers. We either see him being the comic relief in his own films, being the protagonist, or being the comic relief as a side character, but in this he's very much different, which actually caught me off guard, as he's quite an unlikable character for the majority of the film up until the end. It's an interesting change for the actor. The soundtrack as well added a odd, somewhat nostalgic feel to this film, as we get a lot of 2020 hits, but the specific one that I remember is WAP, which does get played multiple times throughout the film, and it somehow has that nostalgic feel as you remember the whole controversy of that song, what was going on at the time, and it's odd that it does that, as 2020 was only 3 years ago, but because of what was going on at that time and so many headlines and situations happening in people's lives, it feels longer than 3 years. Something I think was really impactful in this film was the humour. I felt that it was not forced like certain dramas, and it stayed strong from the very beginning all the way to the very end. Now lastly, it's a very small detail but I very much enjoyed it, is seeing the financial situation of each and every character from the very beginning all the way to the very end, and seeing how this GameStop situation impacted on their financial state. When it comes to criticisms, I do have a few, starting with the antagonists of the film. I don't think they portray them that unlikable. Whilst they do have unlikable traits and qualities, they're not the most unlikable people, and if anything, I think they could have done a better job at vilifying these antagonists, personally speaking. And then my second criticism is about the third act, as I don't feel like it's that climactic, as whilst it's very serious in what's going on with Keith and all these other big hedge fund type of guys, it doesn't have that serious tone, to me anyway. Overall, I do think this is a very hooking film, plot-wise. I think it's very funny, but I just feel like in the third act it could have been bigger than what it was. Overall, is this film good? I'd say yes, it is quite good. Rating-wise, I would say a decent 7 out of 10. would I rewatch this film? I would rewatch it with others immediately, but watching it by myself, maybe a year or two. Now, when it comes to recommendations, there are plenty to choose from, as this is a David versus Goliath story, but I'm going to be picking two specifically. First being The Big Short, as it is also about a huge financial situation that had happened. The Big Short is about the 2008 economic crash and about how three groups or people noticed this very early on and bet against the bankers, very similar to how Keith bet against Wall Street with GameStop. And then my second recommendation is the film War Dogs, where it's people who are using the system to get rich off of war. Now, what they were doing was unethical, but at the same time it then borders on illegality. And then it's somewhat similar as both Keith from Dumb Money and the main characters from War Dogs. They are using the system, but what Keith was doing was perfectly legal and he was not manipulating anything whilst these guys were. Those are my recommendations. This has been my review for the film Dumb Money. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like and subscribe, but most importantly, thank you and have a nice day.